Have you ever heard of a king so strange, so deformed, that people believed he wasn't even human? Not just ugly, not just sick, but cursed, haunted, even bewitched. Imagine a child born into royalty, yet feared by his own court. Whispers followed him through palace halls. Servants refused to meet his eyes. His face, his body, twisted in ways that terrified the people. Some said he was the devil's child. Others believed dark magic had shaped his bones. But here's the shocking part. None of it was his fault. This king's life was not just bizarre, it was tragic. His deformities were real. His suffering was real. And the truth behind them is more disturbing than any curse ever imagined. In this story, we'll uncover who he was, how his body became a symbol of fear, and the real reason history tried to hide him. If you stay with me till the end, you'll not only discover the dark truth behind this forgotten ruler, but also learn how centuries of fear, politics, and lies turned a human into a monster. He was born into power, but power couldn't save him. His name was Charles II of Spain, a king by blood, but a prisoner of his own body. He came into the world in 1661 in Madrid. From the moment he was born, people knew something was wrong. He was weak. He couldn't speak properly. He couldn't walk without help. His face looked unnatural. His jaw was so large and misshapen, he couldn't close his mouth. Eating was difficult. So was breathing. In public, he looked like a ghost of royalty, pale, slow, and twisted. But no one dared to say it aloud, not at first. Behind closed doors, though, the whispers grew. Priests blamed demons. Doctors offered prayers instead of cures. And the people, they called him cursed. They believed black magic had touched the royal bloodline. But this wasn't just fear. There was a reason for it, one that goes deeper than myths or monsters, one that hid in the royal family's past, generation after generation. Before we reveal that, let's go back. Before he was a king, before the world called him bewitched. Let's trace the roots of his story and how the curse of his body began. The story of Charles II didn't start with him. It started long before, deep in the royal bloodline. For over 200 years, the Spanish royal family had married within their own circle. Cousins married cousins. Uncles married nieces. They believed it would keep the bloodline pure. But instead, it built a silent trap, generation after generation. Charles was the result of that trap. When he was born, his parents were uncle and niece. That's not just close, it's dangerously close. Their genes were almost the same. And when people with similar genes have children, there's a high risk of disease, deformities, and even death. But back then, no one understood genetics. They thought royal blood was special, blessed even. Charles was born with the cost of their mistake. From the start, he struggled. He didn't talk until he was 4. He didn't walk until he was 8. His head was too large for his body. His tongue was too big for his mouth. He drooled constantly. He had seizures. He was sick nearly all the time. His mother, the queen, tried to protect him. She ruled in his place for years. But even she couldn't stop what was coming. The people began to fear him. He was too strange, too slow, too quiet. They started saying he was cursed, that God was angry with Spain, that a demon lived in the palace. But no demon did this. What caused his suffering was not magic, but blood. His own bloodline twisted by centuries of inbreeding. And yet Charles would grow up to wear the crown. The question was, for how long? Charles's childhood was anything but royal. Most children learned to run, play, and laugh. But Charles spent his early years in pain and silence. He was often too weak to stand. He had trouble holding objects. His jaw stuck out so far he couldn't chew properly. His tongue made speech nearly impossible. When he did speak, his words were slow and hard to understand. People around him whispered that he was simple-minded. Some even thought he was cursed from birth. The palace was filled with fear, not joy. Doctors came and went, but none could help him. Instead of real treatment, Charles was given spells, charms, and holy water. They thought prayer could heal what nature had broken. At court, people avoided him. Servants stared but quickly looked away. Many were afraid. Some believed the boy was a sign of God's punishment. Others thought a witch had touched the royal family. One legend claimed a dark spirit visited the queen before his birth. And Charles, he grew up hearing the whispers. He didn't attend lessons like other royal children. He didn't play with other nobles. Most of the time he was kept hidden in the palace, away from the public eye. His mother ruled Spain as regent, trying to shield him from both politics and shame. But even she couldn't hide the truth. This was the heir to the Spanish throne, and one day he would rule a powerful empire, whether he was ready or not. And the world wasn't ready either, because when Charles finally became king, his strange appearance was only part of the story. The real fear began when he took the throne. In 1665, Charles's father, King Philip IV, died. Charles was only 4 years old. Too young, too fragile, too broken. But he was now the King of Spain. Of course, he couldn't rule on his own. His mother, Mariana of Austria, stepped in as Queen Regent. She held the real power while Charles grew up, if you could call it growing. He remained sickly, weak, and distant from politics. Still, his face appeared on coins. His name was spoken in court. He was king in title, but not in action. As Charles got older, everyone hoped he'd improve, that his mind would catch up, that his body would get stronger, but it didn't. And the people noticed. By the time he turned 14, rumors had spread far beyond the palace walls. Foreign diplomats wrote letters describing his strange face, swollen jaw, and lifeless eyes. Some said he looked like a corpse. Others said he barely spoke during meetings. One French ambassador wrote, "He is ugly beyond belief." The Spanish people began to fear not just their king's looks, but his leadership. He didn't understand war. He couldn't make strong decisions. His words were slow, his thoughts slower. His advisors often made choices for him, and some took advantage of his condition. Ministers fought over influence. Corruption spread. Other European nations saw weakness. Enemies began to circle. But the most terrifying thing wasn't his mind, or even his failing body. It was that Charles had no heir, no child, no future. Spain's most powerful dynasty, one that ruled over half the world, was on the edge of collapse. And at the center of it all was a king so deformed, people thought his reign was a curse. But what did he really look like? And what exactly made him so disturbing? That's where the story turns darker. Charles II didn't just look unusual. His face was a mirror of centuries of royal mistakes. The most striking feature was his jaw. It jutted out far from his face, creating what doctors now call the Habsburg jaw, a condition so extreme that Charles couldn't close his mouth. His lips stayed open. His teeth barely met. Chewing food was difficult. Speaking clearly was nearly impossible. His tongue was large and thick. It filled his mouth and pushed against his crooked teeth. That's why most of his words were slurred. Sometimes his own advisors couldn't understand him. His head was large for his body, his limbs thin and weak. He had trouble standing for long. He tired easily. His hands trembled. His eyes often looked dull, as if his mind wasn't fully there. But Charles wasn't stupid. He was trapped inside a body that didn't work, and a mind weighed down by sickness, pain, and years of isolation. Modern scientists believe Charles suffered from many health problems, passed down through his family. He had a large, jutting jaw, a soft skull that didn't form properly, and likely some hormone problems that slowed down his growth and development. Some experts think he may have had a condition that made learning and speaking much harder, both mentally and physically. But in the 1600s, no one knew these words. To them, Charles was a sign of bad omens. His appearance was so shocking that many believed something. Evil had touched the royal blood, and his family history backed up the fear. Records show Charles had more genetic similarity in his family tree than a child born from siblings. His ancestors had intermarried so much that his genetic diversity was dangerously low. His body was built from broken code, and yet every day he wore a crown, sat on a throne, tried to act like a king. But behind palace doors, the truth was clear. This wasn't just a man with a medical condition. This was a king whose very existence became a national nightmare. And as stories of his strange looks and failing health spread, the legends around him grew even stranger. The palace was no longer just a royal home. It had become a house of fear. Whispers followed Charles wherever he went. Whispers that he was cursed, that the devil had claimed him, that his twisted body was proof of witchcraft. Some said mirrors were banned from his chamber so he wouldn't see his reflection. Others claimed he never smiled, not once in his entire life. Servants said he spoke to shadows. Some believed he could see ghosts. A few even thought he was one. One story tells of a maid who entered his room, saw him standing still in the dark and ran out screaming. She said his face didn't look human in the candlelight. At court, the rumors grew darker. Nobles spoke of secret rituals. They said the Queen Mother had once called for exorcists, that holy men had tried to cleanse the palace of evil spirits. Some even said Charles had been bewitched by enemies of Spain, cursed from birth so the empire would fall. And the church? It didn't help. Instead of doctors, they brought priests. Instead of medicine, they used prayer. Charles was made to drink holy water, wear sacred charms, and take part in strange cleansing ceremonies. None of it worked, but the strangest tale of all came later in his life. He ordered the body of a long-dead saint to be dug up, hoping that touching its bones would break his curse. When it didn't, he fell into silence for days. That silence only made the rumors grow. People began to wonder if Charles wasn't cursed. Then what was he? Some said he was a puppet. Others said he was a ghost ruling in place of a real king. But behind the fear and mystery, one thing was clear. Charles was not well, and neither was the empire he ruled. As his health worsened, so did Spain's power. And soon things would take a much darker turn. As Charles grew older, his body began to break down even more. He was only in his 20s, but looked much older. His skin became pale and thin. His hands shook. His voice grew weaker. He often had trouble walking. Some days he couldn't even get out of bed. His mind also seemed to slip. He forgot things. He repeated himself. He stared into space for hours. Some courtiers said he no longer understood what was happening around him. But the kingdom still needed a ruler. So others stepped in. Advisors, nobles, and even foreign powers began fighting for control. Everyone wanted a piece of Spain. Everyone wanted to speak for the king, who could barely speak for himself. Behind the scenes, greed and lies filled the royal court. Ministers lied to Charles. They made decisions without his knowledge. Some made themselves rich. Others made dangerous alliances. Enemies of Spain watched closely. They saw weakness, and they planned. Meanwhile, Charles was pressured to marry. People hoped that an heir might save the dynasty. He married twice, but both marriages failed. He could not have children. The Habsburg line, once so powerful, now faced extinction. And Charles knew it. He became obsessed with death. He talked about dying constantly. He feared the afterlife. He asked priests if he had been cursed before birth. He asked exorcists to remove demons from his body. He even wrote letters, begging God for forgiveness, though no one could say what he had done wrong. His health kept slipping. One day he would collapse suddenly. The next he would lie in bed for weeks. His legs swelled. His skin turned yellow. His body was slowly shutting down. And yet he was still king, a broken man sitting on a broken throne, while the empire around him began to crack. Soon the end would come, but his death wouldn't bring peace. It would bring one of the most dangerous power struggles in European history. Charles II died on November 1st, 1700. He was just 39 years old. When he died, he weighed barely 100 pounds. His body was so thin, so fragile, that some said he looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin. His death was quiet. No loud mourning. No strong legacy, just the end of a long, painful life. But his death didn't end the trouble. It started something even worse. Charles had no heir, no child to take the crown, and that meant the Spanish throne was now open for the taking. Multiple royal families across Europe claimed they had a right to it. France, Austria, and other powerful kingdoms prepared for war. Each one wanted control of Spain's massive empire, its land, its wealth, its colonies. They didn't care about Charles. They only cared about the crown he left behind. And so began the War of the Spanish Succession, a brutal conflict that lasted more than a decade. Thousands died. Entire regions were torn apart, all because one man had ruled with no strength, no children, and no future. Historians now see Charles's death as the spark that lit the fire. But even in death, his body told a final haunting story. When doctors examined him, they were shocked. His body was full of strange signs: a small, shriveled heart, black lungs, a single shrunken testicle, and a brain described as dried out. One report even said he had not a single drop of blood. Of course, that wasn't true, but it showed how strange and broken his body had become. Charles II, once the most powerful king in Europe, had died as the symbol of a fallen empire. But one question still remained. Was he really cursed? Or was something else to blame? Something even more tragic. For centuries, people blamed witchcraft, curses, and evil spirits for what happened to Charles II. But today, we know the truth, and it's far more disturbing than any spell. Charles wasn't cursed by magic. He was cursed by his own blood. His family, the Habsburgs, had practiced inbreeding for generations. Royal cousins, uncles, and nieces married to keep power in the family. It seemed like a smart move back then. Keep the throne safe, keep outsiders away. But it was a deadly mistake. Modern scientists have studied Charles's family tree. It turns out his parents were more closely related than most siblings. In fact, he had less genetic variation than a child born from incest. His genes were damaged, repeated, and stacked with disorders. His deformities, his weakness, his infertility, they all came from this genetic collapse. One study showed that Charles had over 25% inbreeding in his DNA. That's dangerously high. It made his body fragile, his brain slow, and his health hopeless. All the prayers, rituals, and exorcisms could never fix that. The real horror is that Charles never stood a chance. He was born into a powerful family, but trapped inside a failing body. Blamed for things he didn't understand, mocked for how he looked, feared for what he represented. He wasn't a monster. He was a victim of royal pride, of political greed, of a dynasty that chose bloodlines over basic human health. In the end, Charles II became a living warning, a reminder that even kings can fall, not from war or betrayal, but from the hidden damage passed down by their own family. That's the disturbing truth, and that truth is darker than any curse. So what can we learn from the life of Charles II? He ruled one of the most powerful empires in history, yet he lived a life of pain, loneliness, and fear. People called him cursed, but he was never cursed by magic, only by the choices of those who came before him. The twisted jaw, the weak body, the slow mind. All of it came from a long line of royal inbreeding. The Habsburgs thought they were protecting their power, but in reality, they were planting the seeds of their own destruction. Charles didn't lose a war. He didn't suffer betrayal by enemies. His enemy was his blood. His story isn't just a tale from the past. It's a warning about pride, about ignorance, about the danger of believing power can protect you from nature. Behind every crown is a human, and sometimes that human pays the price for the mistakes of 1,000 years. So the next time you hear about a cursed king or a haunted bloodline, ask yourself, was it really a curse? Or was it something much closer to home? Something written in the bones? Because Charles II of Spain wasn't a myth. He was real, and his life was the most haunting chapter in royal history. Now that you've heard the full story of Charles II, the most deformed king in history, you know the shocking truth behind the myth. This wasn't just a strange tale from the past. It was a tragic life, shaped by choices made long before Charles was ever born. A king who became a symbol of power gone wrong, of science misunderstood, of how bloodlines can build an empire or break one. If you found this story as haunting and fascinating as we did, there's more where this came from. We uncover the dark corners of history, stories the textbooks leave out, and the twisted truths behind the world's most mysterious figures. So go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Like the video if it shook you, and drop a comment. Was Charles II truly a victim? Or was he also a product of blind ambition? And if you stayed with us till the end, here's your reward. Coming next, we're diving into another shocking story about a royal secret so well hidden, it took 300 years to uncover. You won't want to miss that. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep questioning the stories you've always been told.